Thanks for staying with us. Time now for African News with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, as Nigeria marks the centenary of its unification, dozens are killed in 3 coordinated attacks. France's president pledges support in battling Boko Haram insurgents. Also, in Central African Republic, more French troops move in to stem the tide of inter-religious bloodshed. Civilians are too frightened to go home. Our correspondents report from a camp set up by peacekeeping forces in the capital. And Cape Town really does rock. The South African city is voted as the world's top tourism destination by travel buffs in the know. First up, at least 37 more people have been killed by the suspected Boko Haram militants behind 3 coordinated attacks in Nigeria's northeastern Adamawa state. Churches and homes were razed to the ground and civilians executed in the raids on the villages of Kachinga, Shua and Machika late on Wednesday. The military is struggling in its offensive against the Islamist sect. French President François Hollande was the only Western head of state to attend Thursday's celebrations of the centenary of Nigeria's unification. Now, he's hoping to boost French investment in the country, but with that also comes calls for more collaboration from Paris in tackling militant religious hardliners like Boko Haram. France 24's Nicolas Chemin is in Abuja.
Hollande said is that what happened in Africa had consequences in Europe, and that therefore he gave his full support to the fight against Boko Haram led by the Nigerian government. We know that France has also been fighting jihadists in Mali, and Nigeria had actually helped the French operation there by sending 1,000 troops. But what we noticed here today is that there were some 15 heads of state, but there wasn't the Cameroonian Paul Biya, and yet Boko Haram operates along this porous border between Nigeria and Cameroon. Right now there are tensions between the two countries, and that's why Paul Biya didn't come. But many here in Nigeria hope that maybe François Hollande in the coming weeks can patch up the relationship between Cameroon and Nigeria so that the fight against Boko Haram can become more efficient. François Hollande, who this Thursday in Abuja also announced that he wanted the French army in Africa to be less static and to be closer to the African armies all over the continent. And he announced that the French army would train 20,000 African soldiers every year.
Well, after Nigeria, François Hollande heads to Central African Republic on Friday, where he'll be visiting the French peacekeeping troops there. Now, Christian militia who accuse Muslim civilians of backing Seleka insurgents who took over last year have launched brutal attacks across the country. At least 11 bodies were collected from Bangui's PK5 neighbourhood late last night. Across the city, many Central Africans are too frightened to go home at night. Our Chris Moore sent us this report.
Bangui by night, and with a curfew in force, the main roads are empty. Our French army escort takes us to see a night shelter in the heart of the 5th arrondissement. It's 9 p.m. and families are still trickling in. New arrivals are frisked for weapons. Inside, tents in which people can sleep in safety when they're too frightened to stay at home.
This one was put up yesterday, and it's already full.
The site holds up to 3,000 people, and tonight is brimming.
There was a lot of gunfire in the area last night. So many people ran here for shelter. They only stay here overnight, then they go back to their homes in the morning.
The mayor set up the shelter in conjunction with the French and African forces who guard it. The goal, to bring displaced people back to their own neighbourhoods, with the promise of a safe haven right on their doorstep. The intercommunal violence here is subsiding, but people's houses are far from safe.
There are a lot of gangs who aren't necessarily connected to the anti-Balaka or other groups like that. They're just young delinquents who go out looting. They throw grenades into residential areas in the middle of the night. People run from their homes, and then they just go in and take everything.
The nightly looting, a further threat to an already terrorized population.
There's gunfire around the place all night.
They came to our house and went through our possessions. They took almost everything. There's nothing left in the house.
Now, for the moment, this night shelter remains a pilot scheme, but it's one of the options being looked at as the rainy season approaches in terms of clearing out some of Bangui's huge refugee camps.
Well, as the EU works on drumming up contributions to a force of up to 1,000 troops to be sent to Central African Republic, on Thursday, ex-Soviet Caucasus state Georgia pledged to send 150 soldiers. Its defence ministers said that it is morally right to do so. In other news, Somalian al-Shabaab extremists have claimed responsibility for the car bombing that killed at least 7 people in Mogadishu on Thursday. The blast happened near Lido Beach and targeted a cafe known to often be used by security officials. The attack comes a week after the militants carried out a major attack against the presidential palace. And finally, Cape Town's taken the cake when it comes to the world's top tourist destination. It was named the best spot for a getaway by several international publications, including the New York Times, the UK's Guardian newspaper, and The Lonely Planet. As well as boasting breathtaking landscapes, perfect summers and bustling nightlife, its links with the anti-apartheid struggle of Nelson Mandela have also attracted visitors. The late president spent much of his 27 years in jail on the notorious Robben Island. Since his death last December, tourists have flocked in ever greater numbers to visit the prison. Well, that wraps up African news from me for tonight. We'll be back with more tomorrow. Stay with us, though. A short break and more news and headlines from around the world. Take care.